The first sign wasn't a streak of light or a thundering boom, it was silence. One by one, orbital satellites went dark, leaving a ring of unblinking eyes around Earth that suddenly refused to speak. At first, analysts blamed a solar flare. Then every major observatory registered the same impossible reading, a gravity well forming beyond Neptune, too stable and too deliberate to be natural. Within minutes, the entire communications grid strained under frantic chatter. In underground bunkers and glass-walled command centers, generals and ministers tried to sound calm as their voices cracked. The news channels showed grainy telescope feeds of a black arc blooming in the void like a rip in reality. What emerged was not a comet or rogue planet, but a fleet, geometric shadows lit by their own eerie blue drive plumes, arranged with the symmetry of thought. No human technology could move that fast, break that sharply, or hold formation against the solar wind without visible thrust. Astronomers calculated arrival times. 72 hours until the first craft reached the inner system. The world had no unified defense plan, only scattered arsenals and uneasy treaties. Economies ran on mutual suspicion, militaries guarded old rivalries. Yet the threat wasn't a missile or a border dispute. It was an intelligence crossing light years with effortless precision. Panic leaked through every layer of civilization. Stock markets tumbled. Emergency broadcasts urged calm while listing evacuation zones no one could reach. Amateur radio operators picked up strange, subharmonic pulses that made instruments vibrate like struck tuning forks. In the static hissed a pattern, countdown tones falling in perfect Fibonacci intervals. A message, a warning, maybe an ultimatum. Heads of state convened through encrypted links, but diplomacy felt absurd when the opponent hadn't spoken. Some argued for immediate surrender, imagining a superior species that could atomize cities without effort. Others called for a preemptive strike with every nuclear warhead on the planet. Neither option held weight. You cannot threaten what you cannot touch, and you cannot surrender when you don't know what is demanded. Beneath the chaos, something older and harder stirred in the human psyche: defiance. It sparked first among the scientists who understood scale better than fear. They reminded leaders that while humanity lacked interstellar warships, it possessed something rarer, an unmatched capacity to improvise under pressure. In labs and research stations, engineers already sketched wild equations on whiteboards, the kind no committee would normally approve. They proposed turning Earth's own magnetosphere into a weapon, bending physics with brute creativity. As hours passed, collaboration outpaced politics. Rival nations quietly dropped firewalls and shared restricted data. Physicists in Geneva solved bandwidth issues for counterparts in Beijing. Cryptographers in Lagos deciphered the alien pulses into a time signature accurate to a millisecond. The pulses were not random threats, they were reconnaissance beacons sweeping for response. Humanity chose to give none. Publicly, leaders maintained a brittle calm. Privately, they authorized a plan so audacious it bordered on impossible. Deep within an old decommissioned collider in Siberia, a dormant project called Aegis existed only as rumor, a framework for manipulating quantum fields to store and release astronomical energy. It had been shelved as impractical, dangerous, and decades ahead of its time. Now it became the planet's single desperate bet. Scientists requisitioned supercomputers, tapped global power grids, and rerouted satellites to feed Aegis. Every major space agency offered resources without hesitation. Cargo planes moved unmarked crates at midnight. Engineers slept in shifts measured by caffeine and adrenaline. What no alien intelligence could anticipate was the human talent for sprinting past theoretical limits when extinction loomed. The world above noticed the sudden lull in panic. News outlets speculated on secret weapons, but official statements remained bland. The truth was stranger. A species that still argued over borders had, in less than a day, behaved like a single organism. The countdown pulses continued, steady and cold, but the fear they inspired had hardened into focus. By the second night, the fleet's leading vessels crossed Pluto's orbit. Amateur telescopes caught their silhouettes against the Milky Way, each the size of a small continent. Social feeds filled with blurred images and shaky videos, proof that the impossible was real. Yet in hidden chambers across the globe, the atmosphere shifted from dread to determination. Humanity's brightest minds worked as if tomorrow was a challenge rather than a deadline. In the early hours of the third day, an unexpected stillness settled. Power grids hummed at maximum load, but streets were quiet. People everywhere sensed the same truth without speaking. There would be no begging, no pleading for mercy. The decision was unspoken but universal. Earth would not offer surrender. It would offer resistance. The fleet breached Neptune's orbit. Instruments detected energy signatures dwarfing every nuclear stockpile combined. Yet the planet below did not blink. Aegis pulsed alive for the first time, a heartbeat of raw possibility buried deep in rock and ice. The alien pulses accelerated, perhaps surprised, perhaps curious. Whatever their intent, they met a silence more powerful than word. That silence carried a message older than language. We are here. We will fight. And we will not break. The pulse of the alien countdown hammered through every monitoring station, but Earth answered only with quiet coordination. Deep beneath frozen soil, the project called Aegis evolved from rumor into reality. Engineers who once argued over patents now spoke in shared shorthand, linking laboratories across every continent into a single mind. Quantum field equations that had lingered in academic journals became late-night coding marathon. The plan was not to build a fleet, there was no time, but to turn the planet itself into a living fortress, an engine of raw physics too unpredictable for an enemy that trusted perfect logic. At the heart of Aegis stood a discovery once dismissed as theoretical indulgence: resonant vacuum containment, a way to bottle zero-point energy in a lattice of magnetic vortices. It demanded power beyond any nation's grid, but necessity breeds invention. Hydroelectric dams pulsed beyond capacity, fusion prototypes were stripped for superconducting coils, and orbital solar arrays were realigned to beam their harvest directly into the Siberian Collider, repurposed as the core of the network. Around the world, every spare watt was rerouted into silent preparation. City skylines dimmed as voluntary blackouts spread, not from fear but from determination. The alien fleet advanced without deviation. Telescopes tracked formations tighter than any human air squadron, each ship a cold geometry gliding at impossible speed. Analysts noted no attempts at communication beyond the relentless pulses, a fact more unsettling than threats. These visitors did not negotiate. They measured, catalogued, and moved forward as if conquest were an equation with a single solution. Aegis turned human unpredictability into its weapon. Programmers designed adaptive algorithms that rewrote themselves every second, creating patterns no enemy sensor could anticipate. Instead of building a single defense, humanity built millions of shifting possibilities. If one failed, another would rise before the failure could be exploited. Swarms of nanodrones launched quietly from hidden silos, dispersing into the upper atmosphere where they became invisible to radar, forming a dynamic mesh that extended Earth's awareness to the edge of space. Each microengine carried a shard of the master algorithm, evolving in real time, communicating in pulses too subtle for alien instruments to isolate. While machines worked, people adapted. Farmers donated high-capacity batteries, university students coded simulation models, and retired radio hobbyists lent antennas to a growing civilian network. Centuries of rivalry dissolved into a single collective focus. No government owned Aegis, humanity itself did. From the smallest village to the most fortified capital, every person who rerouted a what or whispered encouragement became part of the design. Fear transformed into something sharper: resolve. The core team faced brutal realities. The containment lattice could collapse under the strain, releasing energy equal to a small star. There was no guarantee the planetary magnetic field could channel that power without tearing the ionosphere apart. Yet each calculation reinforced a hard truth: risk of self-destruction was preferable to submission. And with every hour, the countdown accelerated. The alien pulses now arrived in rapid trios, like a heartbeat quickening before action. Quiet victories accumulated. A prototype lattice held a charge for 8 seconds longer than predicted. Atmospheric drones achieved near-instant repositioning using chaotic propulsion patterns. Underground supercomputers reached stable synchronization despite operating on 5 continents. Engineers began to believe not just in survival but in the possibility of turning the invaders' certainty against them. As the second day faded, the alien fleet crossed Uranus's orbit. Spectrographs captured their drive signatures, controlled singularities pulsing like captive suns. No known weapon could pierce such armor. But Aegis was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a statement of intent, a planetary mind prepared to bend fundamental forces. Human strategists realized they didn't need to match the enemy ship for ship. They only needed to introduce a variable no perfect equation could solve. Whispers of the plan seeped into public channels despite strict silence. Instead of panic, the leaks ignited a quiet pride. Families lit single candles during blackouts as symbols of contribution, children chalked equations on sidewalks, and musicians composed pieces timed to the alien pulses, defying them with art. The planet, once fractured by politics and prejudice, began to hum with a shared rhythm. For the first time in recorded history, Earth felt like one place, one people. As the final preparations neared completion, the collider's cavern filled with a low, resonant vibration, the birth cry of contained infinity. Sensors showed energy levels climbing beyond theoretical limits, the lattice shimmering like a trapped aurora. The chief engineer, voice hoarse from sleepless nights, simply said, "It's alive." Outside, auroras rippled across latitudes where no such lights should appear, subtle evidence of the power gathering beneath the crust. Still the alien pulses came, now sharp and staccato, as if the fleet sensed resistance forming. Their silence carried a different weight, no longer indifference but calculation. They had measured countless worlds, but none that refused to fit their pattern. Humanity offered no answers, only the implacable quiet of a species that thrives in chaos. When the fleet breached Saturn's orbit, the Aegis lattice stabilized. Global monitors confirmed synchronization across every node, from the smallest drone to the deepest superconductor. Power levels reached the threshold where containment teetered between mastery and catastrophe. Yet no one flinched. In control rooms and improvised command posts, people watched readouts with calm intensity, as if they were not gambling with existence but claiming a birthright. The final diagnostic ping echoed through the network, a single tone that carried across continent. It meant readiness. The planet itself now held a weapon not of steel or fire but of unbounded possibility. The invaders still advanced, relentless and silent, but the narrative had shifted. They were no longer approaching a fractured world. They were approaching a singular force born of billions of minds, a civilization that had turned desperation into innovation and fear into a blade. And so humanity waited, not with prayers or ultimatums, but with the quiet confidence of those who have already made their choice. They would not beg. They would not yield. They would meet the unknown with the most dangerous power in the universe, the capacity to imagine, to adapt, and to act without permission. The first strike came without warning. Space between the alien fleet and Earth distorted, and a column of light brighter than the sun lanced toward the planet's magnetosphere. Instruments spiked off-scale as the beam ripped through the void with surgical precision, aimed to cripple communications and fry every circuit it touched. But the Aegis lattice responded faster than any sensor could record. Quantum vortices twisted, flexing the planet's magnetic field into a living shield. The beam shattered into harmless auroras that danced across night skies worldwide, leaving the enemy's opening salvo wasted against an invisible wall of human ingenuity. The fleet adapted in seconds. Fractal formations unfolded like mechanical flowers, each vessel pivoting into a new geometry. Graviton projectors surged, bending space to destabilize orbiting satellites and threaten tidal chaos on Earth's surface. Yet the adaptive algorithms of Aegis anticipated the distortion, feeding counter-frequency pulses through the ionosphere. Oceans remained steady, satellites held course, and the enemy's precision found only resistance. For every alien maneuver, the lattice evolved a response, rewriting its own code in the time it took for light to cross a city. Then came the true assault, a barrage of hyper-accelerated projectiles, dense enough to mimic micro-black holes, screaming toward the upper atmosphere. Humanity's improvised swarm mesh activated, billions of nanodrones weaving a dynamic barrier. They did not meet the projectiles head-on but altered their trajectories with microscopic gravitational nudges, 1,000 invisible shoves that sent the deadly payloads slingshotting harmlessly into deep space. Observers watching on delayed feeds saw only streaks of light veer off course, as if the universe itself had changed its mind. A momentary silence followed, the kind that prickles the skin. Across the planet, technicians exchanged glances that held equal parts disbelief and pride. The invaders had unleashed weapons beyond human comprehension, yet Earth remained whole. The lattice pulsed like a heartbeat, its resonance spreading into the upper atmosphere and humming faintly through bedrock. Humanity was no longer reacting, it was dictating tempo. The alien armada shifted strategy. 3 colossal dreadnoughts broke formation, spiraling around each other in a gravity braid to amplify their combined singularity drives. The intention was clear: collapse Earth's magnetosphere entirely, strip the planet of protection, and end the confrontation with one decisive act. Sensors predicted catastrophic field failure within minutes. The Aegis team responded by pushing the lattice into overdrive, releasing stored zero-point energy in controlled bursts that exaggerated solar wind patterns. The Sun itself became an ally as coronal ejections surged along the newly amplified magnetic pathways, creating a storm that no algorithm, human or alien, could fully predict. Inside the chaos, human strategy revealed its true brilliance. Rather than matching the enemy's power, the lattice exploited unpredictability. Solar flares intensified beyond forecasted levels, slamming into the gravity braid with violent force. The dreadnoughts' carefully balanced orbits faltered as the very fabric of space around them rippled with unmodeled turbulence. One vessel drifted out of sync, colliding with another in a flash of distorted light that briefly outshone the stars. 2 leviathans, crippled by their own precision, brought low not by firepower but by a human-inspired storm. The remaining ships recalibrated, but the initiative was lost. Aegis seized the moment, triggering the final stage of its design, a resonant energy pulse aimed not at destruction but at revelation. The lattice amplified the planet's magnetic signature into a colossal, harmonious wave that cascaded across the solar system. Every alien sensor, every quantum array aboard the fleet, was suddenly flooded with a single undeniable signal, the entire Earth vibrating with coherent intent, a planetary declaration of existence and will. It was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a demonstration that humanity could bend fundamental forces into an extension of its collective mind. The alien response was immediate and telling. The remaining dreadnought halted its approach, drives flickering as if caught between aggression and retreat. For the first time, the countdown pulses ceased. Space went quiet, an unnatural, deliberate silence that carried more weight than any attack. Across Earth, billions held their breath, sensing that the invaders were re-evaluating a species they had deemed trivial only days before. Then came a counterpulse, a low-frequency tremor that resonated through Aegis sensors like a question rather than a threat. Analysts parsed it as a single concept repeated in harmonic layers: acknowledgement. Not surrender, not alliance, but recognition of an equal. The alien fleet began a slow, synchronized withdrawal, their geometry unfolding into a corridor of light that receded toward the outer system. No debris marked their path, no weapon discharge followed. They had chosen departure over escalation. Relief flooded mission control centers, but it was tempered by an awe that bordered on reverence. Humanity had not merely survived, it had commanded the battlefield with creativity and daring no algorithm could predict. The victory did not lie in superior firepower but in the refusal to be cornered by inevitability. What began as a desperate gamble ended as a masterstroke of collective will, proof that adaptability and imagination could rival any technology born among the stars. As the last alien signature faded beyond Pluto's orbit, the Aegis lattice slowly powered down, its containment fields unwinding with a soft luminescence visible even in daylight. Cities that had gone dark began to glow again, but people lingered in the streets, staring at skies where invisible battles had been fought and won. They understood instinctively that history had pivoted in those hours. The universe had expected submission. Instead, it witnessed a species that turned chaos into strategy and transformed unity into a weapon. The silence that followed was not emptiness but triumph. Earth remained scarred only by memory, its people bound by an unspoken realization. They had stood against an intelligence vast and ancient and had not only endured but prevailed. What came next was unknown, but one truth was unshakable. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it would never be measured as a mere footnote in someone else's equation. It would be the variable that defied every calculation. The final echoes of the alien fleet's withdrawal faded into the cosmic background, leaving a sky so clear it felt newly born. Across the planet, power grids stabilized and city lights flickered back to life, but no one rushed to celebrate. Humanity stood beneath a quiet that felt alive, an afterglow of triumph and possibility. The world understood it had crossed an invisible boundary. It was no longer just a planet of intelligent creatures. It was a force recognized by the galaxy itself. In the subterranean halls where Aegis still thrummed with residual energy, scientists watched instruments confirm the impossible. The quantum lattice, once thought a fragile experiment, held its form even as power output returned to normal. It had become more than a defensive weapon. It was a stable, replicable technology capable of reshaping civilization. Engineers who had prepared to dismantle the system now stared at readouts that hinted at limitless energy and instantaneous communication, gifts drawn from the very zero-point field they had barely dared to tap. Governments convened emergency sessions, but their debates carried a different tone. No one argued about borders or rivalries. They spoke of stewardship, of what it meant to wield something so profound. For once, the question was not who would control it, but how to protect it from misuse while sharing its potential. Humanity had glimpsed a unity that made old divisions seem childish, and the memory of that unity still pulsed like an unspoken vow. Outside the chambers of power, ordinary people sensed the same shift. Streets that had been darkened by coordinated blackouts now glowed with small lanterns and impromptu gatherings. Neighbors who had barely exchanged words before the crisis shared stories of how they'd rerouted electricity, coded algorithms, or simply stayed calm when fear could have ruled. Music floated from rooftops, a quiet celebration of survival and the strange beauty of solidarity. No monuments were needed. The night sky itself had become the memorial. Messages began arriving from deep space outposts and distant probes. Instruments recorded subtle fluctuations in gravitational waves, almost rhythmic, as if civilizations unseen were sending their own acknowledgments. Whether those signals were greetings or simple observations didn't matter. The galaxy now knew Earth's name. Humanity had spoken in a language older than speech, the unyielding assertion of existence. Scientists quickly realized the victory's implications stretched far beyond defense. The Aegis lattice, once a desperate gamble, was a door. With it, energy scarcity could vanish, interstellar travel could accelerate, and the barriers of distance and time might erode. What had begun as a planetary shield could become the foundation of a civilization capable of spanning the stars. The alien confrontation, intended to intimidate or annihilate, had instead propelled Earth toward a technological and philosophical renaissance. Yet beneath the pride lay a lingering question. The invaders had been powerful beyond comprehension, but their retreat suggested they were not the ultimate force in the cosmos. The final tremor they sent before leaving, acknowledgement layered with something that felt like warning, echoed in the minds of analysts. It hinted at dangers greater than even they represented, a vast hierarchy of unknown powers for whom this encounter might have been only a test or a message. Rather than breed fear, that mystery became inspiration. Researchers from every nation formed joint councils to study the residual data, determined to decode the alien signal completely. Philosophers and historians gathered with physicists to frame what had happened, to ensure the memory of unity and courage would not fade into myth. Humanity's next step would not be isolation. It would be exploration, driven by curiosity sharpened by victory. The people themselves embraced a new identity. Children who had watched auroras ripple across unexpected skies now dreamed not just of surviving on Earth, but of walking under suns yet unseen. Artists captured the glow of the Aegis lattice in murals and music, while writers shaped new epics about a species that refused to bow. The phrase, "the day Earth became the strongest force in space," spread through every language, not as a boast but as a reminder of what collective resolve could achieve. Leaders pledged that the knowledge gained would serve all of humanity. Energy drawn from the zero-point field began powering hospitals and remote villages before military installations. Space agencies announced cooperative missions to push outward, not as separate flags but as a shared venture of a united world. For the first time, exploration was framed not as competition but as destiny. Night after night, people looked upward with a different feeling. Stars were no longer distant mysteries or threats waiting to descend. They were destinations, markers on a map only beginning to be drawn. The fear that had gripped billions had transformed into a restless excitement, a hunger to meet whatever lay beyond with the same audacity that had turned despair into triumph. In quiet moments, the architects of Aegis reflected on the paradox of their creation. They had built a weapon and discovered a promise. They had prepared to destroy and instead had opened a path to creation. The lattice remained active at a low hum, a heartbeat beneath the planet's crust, ready but at peace. It was a guardian and a guide, a testament to what happens when imagination and necessity converge. As months passed, no further signals came from the departing fleet. Perhaps they watched from the dark edges of the system. Perhaps they had simply acknowledged a new equal and moved on. Either way, the message was clear. Earth had proven itself, and the universe had taken note. No longer merely a fragile sphere in an endless void, humanity had become an actor in the grand theater of the cosmos. And so the world moved forward, not with arrogance but with quiet certainty. The day of terror had ended as the dawn of something greater. Humanity had faced the unknown, wielded the impossible, and emerged not only unbroken but transformed. From that moment on, every star in the sky carried a different meaning. They were not distant lights, they were invitations. That was the day Earth ceased to be a question and became an answer. That was the day a single, stubborn species showed the universe the power of its collective will and imagination. That was the day Earth became the strongest force in space.